Welcome back. Now, the recent KwaZulu-Natal murders of 10 people in Pietermaritzburg last Friday is the latest case in the horrifying phenomenon of mass killings that South Africa has come to grapple with. Now, 4 people were also shot dead in separate incidents on Thursday in KwaMashu, while another 3 were gunned down in separate incidents in Durban, making it a total of 17 murders in 5 separate shooting incidents within that area in 24 hours. Now, researchers in policing and public security, our researcher David Bruce, I should say, says that multiple murders in South Africa have actually escalated considerably in recent years. Bruce says that coupled with the major increases in the murder rate, these killings actually highlight a significant shift in violent crime characterized by the rise in firearm use and entrenched organized crime, particularly in some provinces. David Bruce is a researcher in policing and public security at the Institute for Security Studies, and he joins us now virtually. David, good morning. Thanks so much for being with us here on Morning Live.
Good morning, Senior.
So, as you say, the number of incidents in which 3 or more people were killed in 2022 was actually 140% higher than in the 2019-2020 year. Now, can you just give us a little more context to this, and maybe what is leading to this particular phenomenon?
Right. Well, overall in South Africa, what we're experiencing at the moment is a substantial general increase in rates of murder. So our per capita rate of murder has increased to something like 45 per 100,000 people, which possibly places South Africa as being one of the countries with one of the highest rates of murder in the world. And there's specific provinces, at least, which are making a major contribution to this this increase in the number of murders. One of them is the Eastern Cape, but another one of them, which has seen quite exceptional increases in rates of murder over recent years, is KwaZulu-Natal. And KwaZulu-Natal, in KwaZulu-Natal, one of the distinguishing features is the high proportion of these multiple murders. And the first and most obvious explanation for it is what appears to be an increasing use of firearms in violence in the province.
So, David, as you say, KZN has, at this point, perhaps gained some notoriety with regard to the number of people, seemingly, that are contracted from this province to carry out. And we saw in the past political killings, and, that brought this particular notion into stark focus. But now we see recently these mass shootings that are not necessarily associated with political assassinations. So, again, it's difficult to wrap one's head around it. You look at the Babita Deokaran case, and again, the shooters trace back to KZN. There's the Professor Buhlungu case in the Eastern Cape, where one of his assistants was gunned down. Again, one of the people there traced back to KwaZulu-Natal. And one can continue rattling off many of these cases, but then one has to ask, what is going on in KZN, and why is it that seemingly people are more easily contracted, these Inkabi, in KZN than anywhere else in the country?
Right. Well, that's the question that we should be focusing on, because it's apparent that, the province, increases in murder in the province. The province currently has, is the province with the highest number of murders of any province in South Africa, and one of the highest per capita rates of murder, second only to the Eastern Cape. So it seems that, there's some pattern of violence which is almost entrenched within the province, which one can in some ways date back to the 1980s and 1990s, where political violence in South Africa was most concentrated in what is now KwaZulu-Natal province. And it seems, particularly since about 2012, 2013, there's again been a resurgence of violence in the province. The area where these murders took place is the area around the Plessislar police station outside in Pietermaritzburg, is one which has been particularly characterized by quite dramatic increases in levels of murder. Firearms are clearly playing a role, so it seems that there's increasing availability of firearms. This kind of Inkabi kind of industry in the province plays some kind of role. And then there seems to be some kind of role played by forms of kind of criminal groups of possibly drug gangs or other types of criminal gangs in the province. So, we should be focusing much more on understanding the dynamics of violence in the province. And that speaks to some of the deficiencies in the current state response to the problem.
And just honing in on that, David, during the July 2021 unrest that played out in KwaZulu-Natal, there was reports of a substantial weapons cache that was stolen from the harbour. And in a province that has now become notorious for assassinations, why hasn't there been, I suppose, a more vigorous, a more pointed approach in trying to locate who was responsible for that in order to maybe get back whatever was stolen?
Well, you see, part of the answer would appear to be that we aren't applying the right kind of approach to, strengthening the policing system. So in many ways, what we are facing is a situation where police are overextended. But instead of, trying new and innovative approaches to strengthening policing, what we consistently are doing, what government is doing, is simply reproducing an established formula. And so, it seems that wherever there is, some new manifestation of violence, principally what the police seem to be doing is to, establish another task team. But they aren't looking at the more kind of systemic problems, feeding into the limitations of the police. They aren't, for instance, reviewing the human resourcing systems and so on. And so we aren't getting overall improvements in our policing system. There hasn't been, for instance, it's known that there are chronic problems within the crime intelligence division, which should be, a source of information about issues like firearm proliferation in the province. But there hasn't been a thoroughgoing response to, getting to the bottom of the problems in the crime intelligence division. And so, we aren't really moving forward in, with our efforts to improve our policing system.
So why is that the case, David? Is it because we don't know what to do, or is it because there simply isn't the necessary will to deal with this problem? Because if you look at what happened recently, the provincial government hosted a crime-fighting imbizo, and this was attended by provincial ministries such as community safety, economic development, speaking to maybe trying to get to the root cause of these problems. But, is that a good strategy? Is that sufficient in terms of moving in the right direction to try and deal with and contain this scourge?
Well, you see, I don't want to be dismissive about the possible value of an imbizo, which might be a way of, involving and improving community participation and so on by, different role players. But the core issue is about the quality of leadership that we are getting at a national level. So, what we need is a type of what you would call strategic leadership, which is about focusing on, key problem areas and developing well-considered strategies for strengthening the policing system. And, as I've said, to a very large degree, government's response to the problems in the crime and policing domain is many ways one of reproducing an established formula. There isn't any innovation, there isn't any real engagement with the systemic problems in the policing system. And so, we're pretty stuck right at the moment in terms of, our ability to address the deep-rooted problems in the SAPS.
So just finally, David, assuming that management is stuck, the leadership don't know what to do, what would you advise them? Where should they start?
Well, part of it is that, what we have in South Africa is a very large police service. It's a national police service. It's a complex organization. And, part of what government needs to have in order to provide effective leadership to this organization is a very solid policy-making capacity. So it's got the capacity to think about how to, strengthen the SAPS as an overall organization. It's got the capacity to analyze, the information on, for instance, the policing challenges in KwaZulu-Natal and, develop an appropriate response. But to a very large degree, we've got a government which doesn't have the capacity to put in place that kind of response.
Well, David, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time this morning. David Bruce, an independent researcher and consultant at the Institute for Security Studies. And David was discussing, of course, the increase in the scourge of mass shootings in South Africa and particularly in the KwaZulu-Natal province. Feel free to let us know your thoughts at Morning Live SABC as well.